There was a lot of running around at 225 saying, "Can I find these connectors? Can I can I figure out where all this stuff is?" All right. So if you're ready, we'll just kind of get right into it.
Let's get right into it.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about your book, Rebuilding Blocks, and tell us kind of the story that led you from like your life to kind of the beginning of the book.
Yeah, so Rebuilding Blocks is a book I recently published about my life with Kubb and largely my life. Kubb is a traditional Swedish lawn game that here in the Upper Midwest, by which I mean primarily Des Moines and north, is somewhat popular, especially competitively. So I was introduced to the competitive Kubb about 3 years ago, where you're competitively throwing blocks to knock over other blocks, and got completely addicted. And at the same time, I was, father of 3 and not liking it, running my own company and not liking it, and trying to write a book and not liking it. And so the Kubb got me away from all of those things and got me outside and got me thinking about what I actually did want. And then, but I still, at the end of the day, was fighting with this book. And so I got a little help, and they said, well, why isn't your book about Kubb? And I said, my goodness, you are correct, it is. And after that, it all just came together.
Okay. So I think in a lot of ways, I would think I'm pretty close to an ideal reader for this book, right? Because I am in a similar career to you. Mm-hmm. I'm even structured as a consultant. Although I'm a full-time employee, I'm kind of in the services wing of my company. So right. I basically have the life of a consultant just without the direct. So I'm on salary. So when I work 100 hours a week, I make exactly the same amount of money. Yeah. So I kind of lose the downside. Yeah. But I have that. I'm a relatively recent father. Mm-hmm. I'm not as seasoned and weathered as you, but so I have a lot of the issues that you talk about, and partly from your advocacy and partly kind of for this interview, I have gotten my own Kubb set and I have played some Kubb over the holidays. So.
Wonderful time to play. How did it treat you?
So I took it. I played the day I got it. I just took it in my backyard, which is not even. I actually encroached on the neighbors because I don't really have the footprint anywhere for. I don't have a 5 by 8 meter solid grass anywhere. So I kind of went into their yard and just threw it, and it was very kind of zen and relaxing. But on the holidays, I took it, and my brother and I, in the middle of festivities, went out in kind of a light drizzle, and we threw for maybe an hour and a half, in which time we did 2 complete games. Yep. One was about 20 minutes, and one was about 70 minutes.
Yes, exactly.
But we both enjoyed it, and the second game that was largely a stalemate for a long time. Yep. We were kind of, we were basically talking through the strategy with each other, and we were kind of learning as we were going why we would do things. So I basically had no more experience than him, other than kind of listening to you talk about it. Yep. I had 15. I was 15 minutes ahead of him in terms of throwing time, and but we had a good time, just kind of figuring out. Why we would throw things and why we would place it. And I guess what we ought to do for people who are unfamiliar, which is, I'm going to guess, most people, let's talk a little bit about the rules of Kubb.
Right.
If we can.
Yeah. So there's a lot of them. It's primarily a traditional game. There's a lot of backyard rules. But there are 2 primary rule sets that govern the competitive world. One is the U.S. rule set, and one is the world rule set. They're very, very similar in most cases. So we'll start with the U.S. one. You have a 5 by 8 meter pitch set up. You've got 5 blocks on one side, 5 blocks on the other side. Each team takes turns throwing 6 batons to topple the 5 blocks 8 meters away. And then when those 6 batons are thrown, The other team picks them up as well as any blocks that were toppled, and their first job is to throw the toppled blocks in at least 4 meters, and then those are set up, and those are the first ones that need to be toppled. So that part's a little bit, it's a little bit easier to see than it is to talk about, but it flows really well. And then after those near-term ones are knocked over, they go for the 8-meter ones, and they go back and forth, repeat until all the blocks are down. Mm-hmm. And again, as you saw in your play, it can take 5 minutes, it can take 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 70 minutes. That was exactly what I played with my brothers-in-law over Christmas as well. We played for 4 hours, and I think we only played 3 games. It just it can drag on. The joke here in Minneapolis is that my team gets the most Kubb per registration fee of any team, because we will drag on a game, purposefully or not.
Yeah, one of the things that we found about it as we were playing is that so although it's a competitive game, it's really serially you against yourself.
Absolutely, because there's no defense to speak of. You don't directly address the opponent in any way. You're not actually active on the pitch at the same time. So it is very much you and yourself. You playing yourself on the pitch, throwing the baton, toppling the blocks, and your misses are your misses. Your opponent didn't do anything to cause your miss. Didn't do anything to cause your team to not progress in the game. You did that, and so it is. You can't blame them for your not being good at it, right? Not being as good as you expect. You have to own up right away. Like, yeah, that was a bonehead move, and I did that, and now I have to hand 6 batons over to the other team. Yeah.
Well, what I guess my experience was, I was surprised how balanced the game is, because it never feels like, even it would be different if we were against I had a really experienced competitor.
Right.
But for 2 people of the same level,
yes, it
feels like everything's equally in reach and out of reach at the same time.
It's a terribly balanced game. I'm so always continually amazed by that, right? Every action has an equal and opposite reaction in the game. You throw a block, you topple a block, you have to throw that back in. You miss it, and that's where your opposing team stands from. It's like everything just sort of has a yin and a yang to it. I think and that's one of the things that helps keep it balanced, even for a more experienced team against a less experienced team, is that you can have a bad day. You can not be even as experienced as you are. You could be throwing horribly, and that gives the lesser experienced team, if they're having a good day, it balances out real evenly. And that's another reason why two sides that are equally experienced can play indefinitely, just for hours.
Yeah, there was in our 70-minute game, and I feel sort of silly talking to you, knowing how experienced you are, and I'm basically talking about one game, right? but in our 70-minute game, we probably had somewhere between 30 and 40 turns apiece.
Yep.
And probably 10 or 15 of those, I stood to the line and I thought, if I do this right, this is a winnable. This game is winnable in this. Yes. I was like, it is me, and then I was like, all right, I made that miss. It is still winnable. No, it's not winnable. It's I can still do well, but I can't win this turn. Now I can't even do well. Now I'm really going to be struggling to clear my field Kubbs. Now I just don't want to, So I went from winning to having a good turn available to now I just don't want to give him a really close baseline to throw from.
Yeah, exactly.
And so now it's like I'm down to my last throw, and I'm really desperate. I've got 3 not that close Kubbs I have to clear this turn, or he's standing almost at the center line.
Yeah. And
it's both exhilarating and maddening while you're playing it.
Yeah, and there's this. I've seen it this weekend or yesterday. I played with my team for some practice for an upcoming tournament. I missed the king shot. And that means we keep going, right? You just like pick them up and keep going, and you're like, and you just be like, well, I guess we'll try again next time if we get a chance, right? Because that was your chance. You got all that way and you didn't close it. Yeah, it happened. Oh my goodness. Jamie Thingolstead and I, in building out the game notation and building out some of the stats stuff, and one of the things that we have talked about in sort of documenting gameplay on the Planet Kubb site with the games is to say, you know, I've been advocating like maybe there's an indicator that we can put in there that says, you know, you are about to win the game, or at this moment the team had an opportunity to win the game. And Jamie's pushback was, well, that's the first turn, right? Essentially, right? Like it would be from the beginning, and it's just how badly do you not lose off that first turn? And so it just, you know, you never put that in there. And I'm like, yeah, you can win from the beginning, or you can just try and bring it back every turn you get. So yeah, very dynamic.
So now I want to go back kind of to the beginnings of your book and kind of your life at that point. Yeah. You had mentioned, you know, so you had your work life, your work and your life were out of balance, and your kind of fatherhood was in there. And you mentioned kind of not liking all those. So like, what specifically like were you not liking about being a parent?
What specifically I did not like about being a parent?
Or was it not a specific thing? Was it just an overall feeling, or what led into that statement?
You know, in retrospect, it's because I wasn't in a position to take care of anybody else. I wasn't taking care of myself, and so therefore I didn't have any energy left to take care of anybody else. I thought I was being the best father ever. I thought I was, you know, providing for my family, you know, keeping the refrigerator stocked with groceries and gas in the car and the mortgage paid and all of that. And you know, I work from my house, so I should be able to spend time with my kids, but I didn't want to because I felt this overwhelming obligation to continue to provide for them financially, but that was eating everything else, right? And so I didn't like being a father because it reminded me of obligations I wasn't fulfilling, and so therefore it's really hard to have sort of quality time one-on-one with your kids, whether it just be rolling on the floor or reading bedtime stories or just having breakfast, when in the back of your mind you're like, how am I going to pay the mortgage? How am I going to like how am I going to keep shoes on this kid? And if that was eating me alive, and so I was doing ridiculous things that would just, you know, it was a spiral that was just, you know, making it making me resent being a father, making me resent doing the work that I did, making me just resent everything. And so, yeah, I didn't like it.
Okay, you know, that's one of the things, you know, and particularly I was much older than you when I had my first child, right? I was 43 when she was born.
Oh, wow.
And I don't recommend that to anyone, if for no other reason than having a baby means there's a lot of getting up and down off your knees. And it's really hard when you're in your 40s. But one of the things that I did, I think partly because I knew you know, I wasn't as spry, and this really is a 20-year-old game, and it really is, you really do, there is a hit for being an older parent. And so I had my baseline was so ridiculously low. Like the weekend we brought her home, I said to myself, my job is to keep this baby alive.
Yes.
If I keep the baby alive, I have done my job. If the baby's happy, that's bonus. Yeah. But alive is really the only thing I'm holding myself to. Is in 3 months, I want this baby to still be alive. The end. Everything else was complete bonus. And I sort of have just really just marginally edged up the bar from there. You know, it's not, I don't really consider it that much higher, even, you know, now they're running around and talking and you know, a little human. It's like, really, my goal is to keep you alive.
Absolutely. And you hit their first birthday and you're like, I did it for a year. Yeah!
So you have a significant, because you had 3, I think you said, and you have 4 now, right? So you have had another child since that period.
Yep. My youngest just is 17 months right now. Yeah. So I have a
Mhm.
9-year-old, a 9-year-old will turn 7 tomorrow, a 4-year-old, and a 17-month-old.
So
Yes.
which was of those children? So you went from 0 to 1, and then up by 1.
Yep.
Which of those were the biggest ones? Like, so I'm assuming the first child was the
Yeah.
second child like equally difficult or more difficult?
Yeah. I tell people around here, two kids is more than twice as hard, um, because they're not the same person,
Mm-hmm.
and you need to figure out what this person's personality is at the same time you're teaching another kid potty training, and so you hit these points where they're sort of challenging aspects of raising kids happen at the same time. uh, but I think I say in the book, like, two kids didn't require me to change my standard operating procedure, right? It put me
Mm-hmm.
right to that line of needing to make a dramatic change, but I rode that line as long and as hard as I could, and it was, and I can see why parents of two kids break down and have divorces, and I can see that. Like, with one kid, you can be like, oh yeah, I've got a kid, and I can be a parent and I can have this career, and you don't really need to dramatically change the way you were pre-kids. I know that we didn't for a long time, uh, but when we had a third, oh my God, right? It flipped me over that line of like what I could handle, and it was that point I'm like, wow, I need to make a dramatic, huge change. I don't even know what that is yet, but I do know that I can't sustain what I was doing any longer. I can't be a dad to 3 kids and do a lot of the work I was doing at that time. Was I also see as a 20-year-old's game, um, doing ridiculously minute, minor, small projects for web marketing companies, uh, and for ridiculously low sums,
Mm-hmm.
and allowing it to stress me out, right? I had what on all appearances looked like a pretty good thing going on, but on the inside, it was beyond my capacity, especially with 3 kids. And so I knew that I needed to, if I wanted to be a good husband and be a good father and still have the independence, I need to make a dramatic change.
Mm-hmm. And I really, in the book, I really did enjoy the way you kind of. It's funny because you have really 3 books going on. You have
Mm-hmm.
kind of a self-help book, you've got your personal narrative, and
Mm-hmm.
then you've got a sports book, or you've got a game book.
Yes.
And all 3 inform each other and kind of wrap around each other.
Mm-hmm.
But the neat thing is, it's each one of those threads, it's perfectly viable viewed in each of those lenses, right? It's usable to get Kubb strategy out of. It's usable to get kind of business, a business perspective out of, and it's usable to kind of understand your personal, your personal story. And I really enjoyed how you kind of worked those 3 threads together.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it was. That was really largely the goal, and my wife was read it right before final draft, and she's like, there's a little too much Kubb in one of these chapters, and I'm like, yeah, I think I'm okay with that right now, right? Maybe they may flesh that out, but overall they were all very balanced, and that was largely the intent, is to say, let's use the game as a metaphor, let's pull out the core principles of the game, and this thinking behind the game, and apply them to my last, what, at that point, 6, 7, 8, 9 years of parenting,
Mm-hmm.
and being independent and figuring out, okay, what are some guiding principles here.
And so for the listeners, kind of tell us a little about what you, kind of the structural changes you made in how you approach your work.
Yep. Yeah. So I'm a huge believer in daily habits. Largely because I think the repetition of it becomes comfortable, right? And so in the book I talk about how I built out a morning routine that allowed me to get up before the kids, take care of myself, get myself ready for the day, and so then I would be ready to take care of the kids' mornings once they got up. So this includes mindful meditation. It includes a good breakfast. It includes all of those things that you're like, maybe I'll try and squeeze them in at some point. Saying, yes, if I can get up at 5 o'clock or 5:30 or even 6 o'clock, I can get all of these things in to take care of me first, and then I can be ready to take care of the kids. And just for being cognizant of my available mental energies, my available physical energies throughout the day to say, okay, maybe the best thing I need right now is to get away from the computer. Maybe the best thing I need right now is a nap or a walk around the block. Or, before I just completely stare at the monitor all day long and just try and power through. But these days I'm like, you know what? The valuable work, the good work, the things I need to be doing are sorting things out in my head and getting the good idea to move forward, and that's likely not in front of the computer. It's likely someplace else. And so really trying to minimize the technology, minimize the sense of obligation and increasing the self-care in a large sense, and just sort of being cognizant of where I can increase a habit or when I'm doing something that maybe is not going to be beneficial in the near term.
Mm-hmm. That's how, I mean, one of the things that I'm kind of having to face in myself is, and you and I both live and work, and even kind of socialize in kind of the same, internet-soaked technology culture. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that it's maybe even being kind of an unspoken assumption or even an unspoken lionization is that even companies, and projects and in situations where people give lip service to valuing work-life balance, mm-hmm. you will never be scolded for the heroic effort. You will always be lauded. And yes. I've noticed this at a previous company where they talked very much about work-life balance, and then when it came time for Employee of the Month, which we would have a monthly meeting, and there would be the Employee of the Month, and when you saw what they were being lauded for, mm-hmm. it was missing birthday parties and yes. working through Christmas to close a sale and things like that. And so, our culture is full of the, it's like, it was time to go live and we weren't ready, so we worked 96 straight hours and then we just barely made it. Yay us! And that's almost part of the appeal. And in the long term, mm-hmm. It's just nobody's life can weather that, for any significant duration. It's just not sustainable.
You're not gonna, and no one's going to write about how amazing you were in pulling those heroic efforts out in your Wikipedia entry after you die, right? You're not going to write about what companies you worked for or how you increased their sales 30% year over year. Those things are not going to be what's in your obituary, mm-hmm. right? It's going to be written by your friends and your family that you didn't spend time with because you were doing some ridiculous heroic effort, right? Mm-hmm. And so being able to say, yeah, you know what, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter if it's 1 or 2 days. It's not going to make a huge difference. What is going to make a difference is whether or not I'm at my daughter's birthday party or at the school play, right? Those things are going to be remembered, even maybe not specifically, but in general. And I think of it this way: like my wife and I have been together for 20 years. You're going to be hard pressed. It's going to be hard pressed to make me want to foster a professional relationship. Right. It's hard pressed for a professional opportunity to surpass some thing that I built with my wife over 20 years. Mm-hmm. Right. And it's I don't know. I like you. I don't know. I believe so. I work for a lot of startups. I work for a lot of nascent companies and nascent organizations, most of which don't exist. Employee of the Month or otherwise, these things, they dissolved, right? And so it's no fun to build something and then watch it completely fall apart and be erased from the earth.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been trying to be more cognizant of what are the things that will persist, that will be remembered, that I could be remembered for, and let's put some energy there.
Mm-hmm. I know that in my life, one of the things that I have probably in the last 6 months really had to come to grips with is the fact that my sleeping habits have been terrible for a long time.
Yes.
And I've more or less hit the point in my life, and I've aged to the point where I can no longer ignore that.
Mm-hmm.
And to continue, see, in college, I was probably, I would say at the time it felt blessed, but it was probably a curse in that I could cram all night, stay up all night, and that would be a successful strategy.
Yep.
So when most people say they pull an all-nighter, they mean they're up till 3 and they sleep till 6. And there would be zero. It was easier for me to stay up than to try to sleep and get up.
There's that moment at 4 a.m. where the sun starts to rise and you get re-energized.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so I could do that. I could write the paper, or I could sit with the book, and I could pass the test.
Mm-hmm.
And in certain ways, that replaced, just like the companies, that replaced the daily habit.
Yep.
With the fact that I know I can always pull this out of the fire if I need to by throwing one of these efforts at it. And in certain respects, that still continues to this day. So some of that DNA is still around, and it's still in my decision making.
Yeah.
And it helped a little with the child, in that there were days when I was literally up all night long with the child, and then I went into work the next morning, and my work, you couldn't tell my work
from that day.
My work product would not have been distinguishable as the all-nighter day.
Yes.
But now I even notice it, like in my weight loss, is the days I don't sleep, I don't lose weight, and I put on weight, and I've had to readjust and realize I have to get a normal human amount of sleep with regularity, or I'm causing myself no end of problems, and it's so unsexy and it's so not glamorous that 4 hours of sleep is not enough, especially when you do it every night for 20 days in a row.
Yes. The book starts out at 2:30 a.m. I'm working on something, who even knows what, because I had done it so many times. And then, I'm sure it was one of those nights where I finally say, well, I give up, right? I've broken it beyond repair, because I should have gone to bed 4 hours earlier, at least. And then, one of the kids is going to be up in 20 minutes, right? And so going to bed at 3 a.m. and then having kids who wake up at 7 a.m. is not enough sleep. It's not enough to get rested and prepare to take care of other human beings. So in the book I talk about all the different ways that I'm like, well, I don't feel rested, so I'm going to throw drugs at it, I'm going to throw metrics at it, I'm going to do quantified self, and all of that is to say I just didn't sleep long enough. I'm like, oh. And so the hardest thing for me about getting enough sleep was getting over whatever sort of internal mental taboo I had against going to bed before 10 p.m. Right? In past, I'd really like, oh, it's 10 p.m. I should start a project. I should, get a snack. I should start something. When in fact, a little tinge was always, you should just go to bed. And so as soon as I started to say, well, I should just go to bed, wow, and then I wake up at 6 a.m. and I lost like 10 pounds just evaporated off me. Mm-hmm. And I felt aware and rested and felt like I could take care of other people. It always surprises me. It so surprises me how the simple answer is sometimes the hardest to implement.
Mm-hmm. And it's kind of our nature. I know for myself, I always have to avoid the siren call of a new Gizwiki or a new system or a new thing. So you think, well, gosh, if I had a Fitbit tracking this, and then I had it in my spreadsheet, then that will solve it. And you don't need that to tell you that you're tired. and and watching Mad Men at 2 a.m. is a terrible idea,
Yes.
and you should just shut off everything. It's the hardest thing to get myself to when I'm reading at night. The first time I nod off, I need to shut everything down.
Mm-hmm.
The very first time, rather than powering through to the end of the chapter or the end of the comic I'm reading or whatever, because I'm not even there.
Exactly.
All I do is I cost myself an hour of sleep trying to that I could have just been. I'm creating no value.
Yeah.
I'm costing myself something.
You're subtracting it from the tomorrow.
Yeah, for no reason. There's the end result is nothing, and it's the hardest thing to do to just say, but I'm falling asleep while I read this. Just turn off the light and go to bed.
Yeah. So in my when I was fighting with some of this material earlier on, and knowing that there was a book here, I'm talking to the coach that was helping me put the book together, and I said, my biggest concern about all of this work is largely it just says be an adult. Take yourself to bed. Wake up in a reasonable hour. Take care of yourself. Have a good breakfast. Like, these are things that adults do, right? Why do I need to write a book that says be an adult?
Well, we do come from a culture of man children and women children that kind of can function day to day, but in large ways are it's not uncommon to find people that are kind of stunted. I mean, it's not uncommon to be kind of stunted in this world.
Yes, exactly. I look at the daily routine that we set up with the kids, the daily the evening routine we set up with the kids, and then you look at yourself and you're like, why don't I have that same thing? Why don't I have a bedtime and a bedtime story, right? And brush my teeth, and get up at a reasonable hour and go to bed at a reasonable hour. It just it seems ridiculous, but for decades I assumed that I was superhuman and could just power through hours upon days upon months without any sleep.
Now, when you started using Kubb to kind of bring things back in line, and this is familiar to me. This is one of the reasons why I have talked about, although I haven't done it yet, I've talked about doing a zine for the longest time, partly because a lot of what we do is digital, ephemeral. Mm-hmm. You just don't touch it. And what I most wanted to do, the best part of the zine to me, was going to be taking the photocopies, stapling, folding, putting in envelopes, mailing to people. The fact that there would be a somatic component to this, as opposed to just tickety, type, tickety, and I'm done. Yep. And to me, it seems like you get a similar thing with Kubb, is that it forces you to kind of get on. So you stand up, but you get out of this, LED glare in your eyes. You go outside, and you have to be physical for a while. You have to be somatic and in the world.
Yes, and the only things that happen are physical things. Though, I mean, you get a nice audio feedback when you do it correct. There's a nice tactile thing going on. You're likely to get dirty. It's just all very, and I have found that I prefer to play, even though it is 2 degrees outside, and it's probably best to wear boots. I prefer in the summertime to play barefoot. I just think it sort of amplifies all of that tactical sense and says, I'm here to be a creature in the world, to be outside and interact with physical objects in a relaxing manner, and it's a nice reminder. And so when I would have a challenging client issue or a challenging project issue, or not know how to solve a professional concern or even a personal one, step outside in the backyard, start throwing some Kubb and thinking about the game and just sort of relaxing everything and just focusing on making a wooden baton topple a wooden block. And the more that I would do that, and the more that I would focus on that, the other stressors and concerns would fall away, and eventually I'd be left with some pieces that I could use to work through a solution to whatever problem I was having. And then the time away from the screen, the time outside in the sunshine, the time completely disconnected from the problem. They talk about the cliche is like you finding the answer in the shower, and it's the same thing. I found a lot of answers out on the Kubb pitch because I disconnected myself from the problem and did something physical and outside in the fresh air, and focused on a very small action.
Mm-hmm. So you had mentioned now I heard about this game entirely through you. I had never heard of it. You were the vector. You were the vector for me learning about it.
Yes.
You said it's not uncommon kind of in the upper Midwest.
Yeah.
So were you familiar with the game before you played it the first time, and kind of what bridged the gap from that until I'm going to go play this game?
My wife and I have some wonderfully old and loving friends who live in Brussels, and they learned about the game just going shopping one day, and they came across for their American summer visit, and they brought a Kubb set with them, and then set it up in our backyard, and that's how I was introduced to it. Right, none of us had any inkling of any of the tournaments that were going on in the upper Midwest, or that there was a world championship, or that it was played competitively or nationally. Nothing like that. We were just trying to figure out what this game was off of a homemade set in our backyard, right? And I got completely enamored by it, fell in love with it immediately for all of the reasons we just talked about: outside, physical. It's ridiculous. I mean, you're throwing a baton 8 meters to hit a tiny little block. It's almost as ridiculous as golf. And so off the front end, you're not going to be great, and then you got to figure out, well, what are all these other blocks, and how do I interact with them, and what's gameplay like, and just sort of trying to feel our way through the game. But we had the kids with, and the kids were having a great time, and we were having a great time. And then once they left and they took their Kubb set with them, I started like, well, I need more of this, and so started investigating, just on the internet, more Kubb stuff, and it turns out that there's, the winter tournament happens here in Minneapolis at the end of January, beginning of February every year, and so I had to immediately sign up with that. But before that, I bought a set and had some friends over, and they fell in love with it. And so it sort of built upon itself, and then I find out that the national championship is an hour and a half away. Well, I got to do that, and there's this huge tournament in Des Moines that's supposed to be amazing that I've yet to get to, and so there's within a couple 3 hours, there are 5-6 tournaments a year happening, and there's this great, hugely supportive community around it, and so it's one of those great things about finding a weird niche thing that people are passionate about, because they are always welcoming, however you found it. They want you to be there because, it's a self-validation thing about, I've got this crazy love, you have this crazy love too, we should be together. So yeah, you're going to meet great people who love these crazy things too.
Well, I've got visions. So I've got visions of the game is not completely unknown here, because I found on Flickr pictures of somebody down at the beach in Myrtle Beach playing Kubb.
Yes.
I think I sent you that picture.
Yeah.
And so I know the game has been played in here within the last couple of years. I have visions of being patient zero in a Kubb mania that swipes the South. Now, I don't know if that's plausible, but it's kind of my vision. And one of the things I'm going to do is occasionally go out kind of in civic places like parks and places nearby. Before I do, I'm going to print out little 3x5 cards with information.
There you go.
I guarantee what's going to happen is people are going to walk up and say, "What is this?" And I'll have some URLs to information and the rules and where you can buy them, and because I want to get people. I'd love for there to be a community down here. I'd like that same sort of community that you described.
And what does not yet exist in the competitive Kubb tournament circuit? Sand tournament.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just saying, you can get up a couple, 3 pitches on the beach.
This is not unlike when we did the Create South conference down here.
Yeah.
That is basically what we wanted to do. Is we looked at a community we wanted to exist in our town, and we went out and we made it happen. Okay, when you have a firm goal like that, it is shocking how small the steps are between between nothing and done.
Yeah, yeah. It's yeah. When you have an idea, you're like, oh well, if I put these two things together and just do it, there it goes, and now I have it, and I want. Yeah, it's surprising. I used to earlier this summer, I would go down on Fridays at lunchtime. I'd go downtown Minneapolis here in one of the parks and set up a pitch, and whoever joined me, and sometimes I just got some good practice in on my own. I remember one day I sent the word out, hey, I'm going to be in the park, at this park, playing some Kubb over lunch, and it completely lit up because there was some huge conference happening, and the guy's like, I was so hoping to get some Kubb in while I was in town. Like, well, right there.
Yeah, I would love to. I would love to have that kind of. I would love for there to be a regional, like a nationally known regional tournament that happens in this area.
Oh my goodness, yes.
Yeah, that would. I know. So let's get a little into your new media background, because part of the reason why I know about this is because I was lamenting to you how you had a podcast that's been dormant. I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years now.
Yeah, wow. Yeah.
And you pointed me to another podcast which is also dormant but newer.
Yeah.
And that's the one that you do with your friend Jamie, who you have mentioned, and you talk. Probably about 60 to 70% of this whole podcast was about Kubb.
Exactly. So we would, we'd use that podcast to work through strategy, to talk about our gameplay at tournaments, and sort of work through the game in our heads. And simultaneously, we were developing the game notation to record games and talking about the weird scenarios we'd see on the pitch that we hadn't yet figured out, and all the sort of aspects of it that I think you sort of expect a competitive community to have, in terms of who are the players and how do they play, and how do you talk about different things that happen during the game, and the game itself. And so we were new enough to it that we were sort of still figuring it out, and it just became this huge thing that we turned on the mics one day, and that's what we started talking about. And we kept going with it, and it worked out well. Every year, so it's been 3 years now, we'll take whatever the latest version of the Kubb score sheets are, take them to the U.S. Nationals tournament, and record all of the quarterfinal matches and beyond. And then on the drive home, we'll go through each of the score sheets and talk about the gameplay that we saw, and did the notation, describe everything. Are there things we need to change? Are there weird scenarios? And so, that's, I think, one of my favorite parts about the tournament as well, is sort of thinking through how dynamic the game is, and how you're always figuring out, how do you describe this weird little thing in even more minute detail.
Mm-hmm. And so the show that you do with Jamie is the Open Loop podcast.
Yes.
And before that, you did First Crack with Garrick van Buren.
Yes.
And so I love both of these shows. For years now, like usually around this time of year, I will put out on social media my podcast world Christmas requests.
Yep.
And they're usually things like, Girls Rule. Usually they're a show that has gone dormant that I want more episodes of. Yeah, Caribbean Free Radio and Girls Rules and Real Reviews Radio and Dan Klass's Old Wave Radio.
Oh.
This year, like 2 or 3 months ago, Michael Gohagan published the first Real Reviews Radio, I think, in 6 years, thereby validating my digital pack rat nature, and I've never unsubscribed from these shows. So it came down. I don't know how many people were still subscribed, but I got it.
Yeah.
And so that, it took years before I got an episode from that, but I got one. And so I'm still holding out hope. There will be more First Crack. There will be more Open Loop.
Yeah, I hope so too. And I believe there will be something. I don't quite know what yet. Still got to work through that. One of the challenges I found. One of the challenges I found with the with the kids is that I lost essentially a year with each one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and so getting back to normalcy and figure out what normalcy is, and then figuring out how something like a podcasting can work into that. And I don't know if I described in there in the book that I took, I don't know, like 3.5 years off of all social media. I just didn't even know how to deal with it, so I just closed everything off. And then it was about this time last year where I had this big whiteboard and trying to figure out, okay, I'm thinking about 2014, I'm thinking about what I need to be successful, I'm thinking about what I want. And I draw, it was like one of those crime procedurals where they're working through all the steps, and at the bottom it says reactivate Twitter account, and I'm like, no, that can't be it. That can't be the answer. So I had to go through the whole equation again, and it turns out that was the answer. And, in a sort of a broad sense, was a re-engage, have some rules around how you re-engage. And so I do see that at some point I'll be in a position where I can say, yes, and I have something to say, and I should grab that mic again and get back on. So,
what I really enjoyed about it is I just enjoyed how I cannot think of another example that was more hyper-local than your show.
Mm-hmm.
It was so rooted around in your vicinity, and which I've never. I believe I have changed planes in Minneapolis. I've never been to Minneapolis or St. Paul, right? So you would, if you did the kind of the Hollywood equation, it's not for me. And yet I was fascinated with these tales of. I remember the peanut butter store at the Mall of America. Did nothing but peanut butters and artisanal peanut butter sandwiches.
Right.
And stuff like that. And this what's the guy's name that did the chef? Was that the guy that did the Dediator workout?
Exactly. I did that once when I just had one kid, and it destroyed me.
I went his website.
I know.
Went away.
I know.
And it's not available. When I had a child, I went to look for it. And I thought, this is perfect, and I couldn't find it anywhere. I still kind of sort of do just the basics of that, not comprehensively, but we do bench presses with 35-pound bench presses with a child squirming the whole time. But that's where, though, so I found it, that on paper shouldn't be for me. The fact that you focused so tightly on what was relevant to you made it relevant to me.
And that's one of the things I liked about it. I find these people that have an interesting story, and sit down with them and you say, tell me the story, and I think there's something about that is compelling, right, across the board with a good enough story and a crazy enough story, because I think there's a part of us that says, I'm not crazy in that way, I'm crazy in this other way, but because you have a craziness, you can relate.
Mm-hmm. Well, and did I meet you? I met you at the second Podcast Expo, right?
Yes.
That's the one time we've ever been face to face. Was in Ontario, California.
Oh my goodness, yes. Wow.
And in a certain way, that was, you and I think kind of stand. There's a certain subset of podcasters that kind of have a similar outlook, and I think you and I are kind of the same, the same school of thought, where monetizing has never been terribly important to us, and in certain ways I've sort of committed audience suicide through various things I've done, but that's never been why I all the make money fast or get big audience. That's never been the stuff that drove me ever, and 2006 was kind of the crest of the first wave of that.
Mm-hmm.
People who were getting in because it was a hot thing. Back when I did Omega Fish, I could measure that because I could see. There was a point in time where I decided explicitly that since it's a recommendation engine, I don't care about shows that have gone away to the extent that you cannot find them. Right, the feed burner's gone and the domain's gone. At that point, there's no value in recommending it.
Mm-hmm.
So I would go through and purge, and I saw how many of those 2006 era shows disappeared versus shows that started earlier or later.
Yeah.
So there were more 2004 era shows that were still around versus 2006 era. Yep. It was an enormous attrition rate. Like 80% of those shows disappeared by 2010.
Yeah.
And so I could actually get a measurement for when the people who didn't have staying power kind of swarmed in.
Mm-hmm.
And I think at this point we're maybe on our second or third wave of that.
I think so. And I joke that I have a hard time paying attention to podcasts that don't have me in them. But largely it's more about, because still so many of them are like the Daily Zoo kind of thing, right? Where they're throwing in crazy voices or overhyping something and then leading into an ad or something like that. And just I find that completely unlistenable. Despite that, maybe there's a couple of nuggets in there that are relevant for me. I just can't get past the facade, which to me is a pure monetization play and facade. Like if we look like this, then it's easier for us to get money. But it's never been. I still don't believe there's enough money in there to make it worth it from that angle. And maybe something like Serial will start to provide the people the inspiration to do something that is a little more subtle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for me, I mean, I learned this lesson in radio, 10 years before podcasting existed,
Mm-hmm.
when the guy who was the founder of the Atlanta Radio Theater Company, in 1995 at DragonCon, when it was also, that year it was the North American Science Fiction Convention because WorldCon was overseas,
Mm-hmm.
and he sat me down in the green room at breakfast one day and basically chastised me for underplaying my hand. He says, the Atlanta Radio Theater Company is bound in what we can do because we've got 20 people that have mortgages and children, and we're always going to be. We can't do things that don't. We can't do something that's going to make 20 people quit their day jobs. There will never be enough money in that pot. He said, but your show is you and a tape recorder, and you're not exploiting that enough. And so basically, he impressed upon me the lesson: keep your cost of production low enough. Mm-hmm. Everything is possible. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you can balance that equation two ways, right? You can get more coming in, or you can reduce the amount that flows out. And if you can do your show for 50 cents a week, there is literally no topic that's not feasible. Everything is feasible.
Mm-hmm. And I think you can extend that. So the lesson that took me way too long to learn was it's not just the audio programs, it's not just the podcast, but it's your entire life. Mm-hmm. If you can keep your overhead at a point where it is manageable, you can do things that dramatically improve your overall life satisfaction, your happiness, your contentedness, with just by changing your perspective. Mm-hmm. For some reason, at some point in time, I had it under my head that I needed to grow this company into a company, and it wouldn't be real unless it had employees, and it wouldn't be real unless this, that, or the other thing. And it was the wrong way. And I just said, well, if it's just me, I can sell whatever service that I want to sell that makes the most sense for whatever price that I think is fair and full of value, and I can do all sorts of crazy things, that I wouldn't be able to do if I still had to pull along a staff of 3 or 4, or whatever that might be, and cover office rental as well as my own mortgage, right? I know what my nut is that I need to cover every month to keep the lights on in my house, and outside of that, I can go play some Kubb.
All right. I had some more I was going to say, but you know what? That's such a good button. Let's stop it right there. So thank you so much. So Rebuilding Blocks is available on Amazon. I'll have links in the show notes for it, and you can search on Rebuilding Blocks. You can Google it. You can go to Amazon. You will find the right thing. You did a good. Did you Google that title before you chose it?
No, I did not. I did, however, was delighted that when you put it into Amazon right now, you'll get my book and how to fix your Ford's engine.
Very good.
Thanks, Dave.
Well, thank you so much. It's been. When did you start First Crack? Was it in 2004?
October 2004. Yeah.
Yeah, because I remember you being a very, very early wave. So for a decade now, we've been on this ride together, and
It's been a fun
I've
ride.
enjoyed every minute of it, except for the ones I didn't.
Thanks, Dave. Happy New Year
All right.
to your family.
All right, thanks. Thanks very much for being on here, and congratulations and l'chaim.
Thank you.
All right.